This episode is in partnership with Authority Magazine. Authority Magazine, a Medium publication, is devoted to sharing in-depth and interesting interviews featuring people who are authorities in business, pop culture, wellness, social impact, and tech. The name of her foundation says it all. It's called Faces of Hope.
And it all started in her native South Africa, where she has worked to assist those facing a future with cancer.
Today we have a conversation with Kerrin Black. Kerrin, welcome to Believe in People.
Thank you so much, Kevin and Amy, for having me. Thank you.
Why don't we start off by having you describe for us Faces of Hope? What an inspiring sort of name. What is it all about?
So a friend of mine at the time was diagnosed in South Africa in a transition period between two medical insurance companies. And so because of that, he didn't actually get any assistance when he was diagnosed with cancer. So I decided I tried to obviously do golf days to raise some money to help him and so on. But obviously people are not that trusting unless it's a registered nonprofit or charity. So that's what the inspiration was for Faces of Hope in starting Faces of Hope South Africa. And then I started getting other families in similar situations, because in South Africa, even though drugs are FDA approved in the States, sometimes it just in South Africa alone to get approval can take up to 8 years. So by that time there's like 50 new cancer drugs on the market. So I just started, having other people come to me with similar issues, saying that they wouldn't get support or medical insurance wouldn't cover the cancer treatment because it was a new cancer drug. And a lot of those people don't just have, R500,000 sitting in the bank, or R1 million, which is about $100,000, sitting in their bank to pay for treatment that they don't even know is going to work. So that's really where the inspiration for Faces of Hope came from.
And I think, and let's look back even earlier. I honestly, Kerrin, I think you jumped out of the womb with, I'm going to help people, and that's it. And also one thing that struck me is you said your goal is to create a legacy to make life better for others. Where's the motivation come from? Like, take us back.
I think that, growing up in South Africa, a lot of people, it's like any country, unless you've lived there and you've, been in that environment, it's very hard to comment on the geopolitical landscape. So, or just, navigate your way. So I think as South Africans, because of, the diversity, because of the multiple challenges that people have on a daily basis, even now, has made us very resilient and fighters. And I think, irrespective of whether you like him or you don't like him, you see the same in Elon Musk and, other people, Charlize Theron, people that, don't necessarily take South Africa seriously per se, have really, risen to the challenge. So I think based upon the way we've grown up, and I'm not saying, I grew up in a in a township like many other people in rural communities did, but everybody has their own set of challenges. So I think that it just comes from having a fighting spirit, and being able to navigate in those situations and conditions, which is, I guess, where my persistence comes from, and my wanting to make a difference in this world, from those circumstances.
So you're a pain in the neck, is that what you're saying?
It depends on your perspective.
I want to ask, because of course I'm in the United States, Amy's in
Yes.
Canada, which has universal health care to some degree, and in the United States and South Africa. I'm not aware of what the healthcare system is like in South Africa, but as you're describing that to us, just tell me, when you hear of people who are ill through no fault of their own, as we are all going to be at some point in our life, because believe it or not, Hollywood or others, we don't live forever, no matter what kind of cosmetic surgery we have. Um, how do you feel about a healthcare system that leaves people out?
Well, I think it's appalling. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I started my nonprofit, because the reality is, and I've seen it from both sides. So if you go into a government hospital in South Africa, you may not come out alive, and I'm not saying that flippantly, but it's challenging. And I know this because my brother, he's recently obviously left, but he's been in the government side of being a medical doctor and specialist in infectious diseases. And I mean, the conditions are just awful. So the challenge is always is that if you're on a medical insurance, even if you're on a medical insurance, there are things that will be left out. There'll be shortfalls that people have to pay. And in my opinion, I don't think that it should be for the select few. I mean, I understand doctors have to get paid and institutions have to run as a business, but I also know, and I also feel for patients, because I've seen, so many patients and so many individuals who just never got the funding and ended up dying as a result, because it's like, well, we can't help you. And
Or is it
even
like you
trying to
don't,
go,
or is it
yeah,
like you
even
don't count?
yeah,
We can help
exactly.
you or you don't count.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, if you take the United Kingdom, it's slightly different here. But then again, it also has its set of problems, because obviously since the pandemic, there's longer waiting times. People, it's great because you don't have to pay, but then the downside is you could wait months and months and months for an operation, or to get seen, and so on. So it's a challenge, but I believe that if you have it for everyone, and you cater to everyone, obviously, that makes it easier for the individuals to be treated. So, but again, there's a downside of, oh well, you're going to have to wait a longer period of time, because there's a waiting list of X months or X years. So it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge, and I don't really know how any one country solves it. I mean, I think that there are countries, like if you look at Norway, for example, they pay very, very high taxes, but then, they get their healthcare, things work there, things function. So again, it's a challenge, because every country and every demographic, is different, and also the number of people. The number of people in Norway and Sweden are obviously a lot smaller than the United States or other countries. But I do think that it should be something that is offered to everybody. I don't think it should be, well, oh, if you don't have the money, we can't help you. Because then I think that people become like, oh, you playing God with people's lives. And I've seen it. I've seen it with medical insurance companies. So
I know.
it's
And
a tough call, but yeah,
it's
I
like
don't
beating
know.
your head against the wall. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, there are solutions, and yet no one's listening,
Mm. And
you know?
also I think, I mean, we've seen it with Big Pharma. They made billions or trillions or whatever through this pandemic, or as I call it, the pandemic. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, we have a drug for you, but you're going to have to pay for it because your medical insurance company won't pay. So then who does that become? That becomes a thing of, oh, well, you either have to be exceptionally wealthy, and then you're only catering to a small number of people, because the medical insurance companies won't pay. So I don't know. I think, frankly, it's a very, very broken system. And South Africa is very similar to the US in the sense that you know, most people will have to, or should be on medical insurance. But again, you're not guaranteed that you're going to get all treatments included, or there's going to be shortfalls, and who pays for that if you don't have the money to pay, and you're already paying a huge amount for insurance. So I think
So,
it's tricky to navigate.
well, of course, and you also need money for research to come up and make these new drugs or create these new drugs for these
Mm.
challenges, and everything obviously costs money. And this is a positive statement, but what you're doing is obviously a drop in the bucket when it comes to this, except yours is a drop in the bucket. What is the reaction of the people that you help?
I mean, obviously they're very grateful. I mean, we've had some amazing, amazing people that have gotten involved in the fundraisers that we've had and events that we've had. We had a incredible event in South Africa with those Chinese lanterns, the biodegradable ones.
Yeah.
And we had the most phenomenal evening, and they all went up, and it was just the energy, like you could just feel everybody that came and everybody that was involved was just so passionate, and people that had personally been affected and touched by cancer, because that's obviously been our core focus, was cancer, was just phenomenal, and people have really been grateful. I mean, we've had to draw a line and say, dependent on their prognosis, which again, it makes it difficult because you don't want to say, well, I'm playing God with someone's life. But at the end of the day, we were not there to be a replacement for medical insurance, but more to help with the shortfalls because of, the problems that people encounter. So, I mean, people have been tremendous, and I've formed bonds with a lot of the patients. I mean, there was one little boy who actually passed away. And, in fact, there were 5 individuals who all needed the same drug by one particular pharmaceutical, and it had horrendous side effects. But, a lot of this, I think 2 or 3 out of them may have managed to have raised some money and gotten permission from the South African Medical Council to bring it into the country. But in fact, all of them died. All of them passed away. But just the bond and the connection and the lessons that many of those individuals taught me and personally affected me was just phenomenal. And just the gratitude from the families, and from the passion from grandmothers to the mothers of the children that passed on, or teens that passed on. I mean, I remember one particular girl, her name was Ndalu. She was beautiful, and her dream was to become a journalist. And she had lymphoma. And, she obviously needed this drug, and we were trying to assist in raising the money. And I'll never forget, her mom phoned me. It was like on a Sunday or something. And her mom phoned me and said, no, she's in hospital. And so I went there, and I went to see her, and then I went the next day. And then, of course, in South Africa, especially, and because there's many different cultures within the Black culture. So a lot of the families come together, and they come to the hospital. And I'll never forget, but the doctor called her mom into the office. I think this was on the Monday. And I'd managed to get somebody to come there and help her, because her skin, just due to the treatment, was making her skin look like wallpaper, like cracked wallpaper. So there was a company that assisted, and they came and they did a treatment which was to help cancer patients. And I'll never forget sitting in that doctor's office, and the doctor looked at the mom and looked at me. And when a mother hears, but she doesn't really want to hear. And the doctor just said, I don't know how much more fight she has. And of course, she cracked when she left the office. And I just said to her, whatever you do, do not cry in front of your daughter, because she knows. And she obviously went to pick up her ex-husband, and I sat with her. And then later that day, when her father came, I left her and her family. And then I got a call just around 7 or 8, half 7, 8, and they just said that, she had said to her mom, "I'm really thirsty." And her mom gave her some water and she took her last breath. And everybody was on the floor. I mean, it was just insane. So, and then I attended her funeral and they asked me to speak. So, it was just so much, in terms of the lessons and trying to carry on a legacy, for these individuals and fight for the rights of these people. It doesn't matter where you come from, what color you are. At the end of the day, that was my biggest thing, was about fighting for these actual cancer patients, because who else was going to do it?
Yeah.
And when people don't know where to turn and what to do, it's very, very challenging. And then you try to meet, sorry.
Yeah, no, and then you try and.
Yeah, and then you try and have meetings with pharmaceuticals to negotiate, but it's like hitting your head against a brick wall. So
Yeah.
they're definitely not the nicest people to deal with.
And where did this fight determination come from? Like how young were you? And wasn't there a story where you reached out to Oprah? You connected with the Oprah in some way too?
Yeah, I mean, that was many years ago when I was at school. And I remember at the time before, they had all these anthrax scares and all of these things, you could actually post a letter, to the Oprah network. And I sent a letter making a recommendation for her show. And I actually got a response, and I still have the letter with her signature. I mean, obviously they didn't accept the recommendation for what I was asking for the show, but yeah, I that was fun. I mean, I never expected that. I've still got the letter actually. So.
Have you has your own family had to deal with cancer in any way, shape, or form? Or where did you, I mean, you said in the beginning that it was a friend, but why has this issue touched you so deeply?
Well, I think it really did touch me because of this particular friend of mine, because I saw the struggles and I saw, how much he was getting into debt and, taking out loans and trying to borrow money from family and friends. But yeah, I mean, my mom had cancer many years ago back in South Africa when we were much younger, and actually she didn't really tell any of us. So someone actually came to me and said, "Oh, I believe your mom's really ill." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" So, because I think parents try to protect their children. I mean, I understand that. And then when my parents moved to the UK, basically a year later, um, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. I mean, he survived, but it was a terrible experience to see. I mean, he lost so much weight, you know, but he was cared for very well in this country, and he got the treatment he needed. But yeah, so it has personally affected us in that way, or affected me. But I would say with my dad, because I'm very close to my dad, it was really not a good, I mean, it was probably one of the worst Decembers and Christmases I've ever had. I've never seen him that thin. It was just awful. But he's back and he's fighting and he's doing his thing, so I'm grateful that he's still here. And yeah, but I think our family, because we've also had a history, and when my mom's father died when she was at school, and at that time they actually didn't really know what lymphoma was. And then a couple of years later, my mom's mom died of the same thing.
Wow.
So it's yeah, and we were all very young, so we didn't really go to the hospital and see her or any of that kind of thing. But yeah, it was so it's definitely, affected many of us in our family, so.
And I mean, and Kerrin, with all that you do, I mean, you're an entrepreneur, so you're your own cheerleader. You have to pick yourself up, and you're working for others and doing good for others and supporting other people. Who supports you? What kind of support do you need? And what are you doing that puts a smile on your face these days? 3 things,
Well,
girl.
I mean, one thing I am disciplined about is exercising every day. So if I go run, or I run and I go to the gym, I've just signed on to the gym in town because of my location, it's a bit more challenging to get, to a gym. I can't just sort of run down the road. But yeah, with regards to, what I do, obviously with my PR, I'm passionate about building individuals' brands through the media.
Yeah,
And I mean
Karen's
the tradition.
phenomenal at this. I just want you to, Kevin doesn't know this, but yeah, that's your sweet spot. I mean, you have really elevated people's careers and through branding and PR phenomenally.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, I mean, that also happened by absolute default, to be honest, because at the time I was trying to raise money for my nonprofit and I wanted a South African living in the States and wanted to actually do some kind of an art exhibition. And it ended up that I ended up doing his PR for 4 years, and I'd never studied a day of PR in my life, and I got him into 12 publications in 3 months.
Who is this person? Kerrin, did you say?
He's an
No.
artist. His name is
Artist.
Conor McCready. Yeah. So, and then from there, I just started building, and then I decided in the November of 2016 that I had had enough, of the struggle in South Africa, and I always felt like my purpose was bigger, and that I needed to get out and see the world. Because as much as I love South Africa, it's still very insular. It's very far from everything. And I just felt like I had so much more to do and so much more to learn. So, because a lot of people don't necessarily understand that the rate of exchange against the dollar or the pound from the rand is very bad. It's like 18 or 19, or I think it's about 21 now to £1. So it's a lot of money. But I ended up doing a trade exchange with someone because it was the only way I could actually get out. I mean, I've got an international passport, so that wasn't the issue, but it was more from a financial standpoint. So I did an agreement, a professional agreement with a real estate person here in the UK. And I said, look, if you pay for my flights and, some of my transportation and things, I will do the PR for the equivalent value. And then I became a nomadic entrepreneur up until the pandemic hit. So
no, but then even then, weren't you in Canada? You couldn't get out of Canada.
Yeah, no, that was actually when the lockdown started, and it was like 2 weeks in, and then we had like a small exit period to get out. So I ended up flying back to the UK. But I mean, I'd been all over, Estonia and, Canada and US. And actually, when I left South Africa, I got on a plane on my birthday on 29th of January, 2017. And I flew to London, and then I ended up flying to Norway. And I lived in Norway, and I'd never been to Scandinavia, put my foot on Scandinavian soil ever. And I lived in Norway for 4 months, and that was the beginning of my nomadic entrepreneurial journey. So that's how that started. Because again, I didn't have money to rent. It's very hard. You know how it is when you don't have a credit history somewhere, and you've got to navigate through all of that. So yeah, I mean, look, I stayed in some pretty shady places along the way, but at the end of the day, it was all experience. And that's the thing, is I think a lot of people glamorize entrepreneurship. I mean, Amy, that it's not glamorous by any means. And I think that what you see on social media is not even close to the truth of what entrepreneurship really is. And I still have my challenges. It's not easy, but we soldier on. So.
Well, soldiering on is that's an interesting way to describe it, because of also the people that you assist, have to soldier on. I mean, it's,
yes.
I want to ask you something, just because you are based in the UK, and it's a bit of a stretch, but it isn't, because it also deals with cancer. And we're coming up to the end of the half hour, and Amy has to ask you the last question. But there has been so much press about Kate Middleton and what has happened to her, and the invasion of privacy with regards to the royal family and her condition. How has that affected you? How the doctored photograph, everybody's jumping all over one another because of it. Everyone is demanding to know what is going on as if it's their business. Everyone demands to know why she isn't present. And then she does that really heartfelt announcement saying that they've discovered cancer. And everyone, in my view, almost hypocritically, jumps around saying, "Leave her alone," said the Sun newspaper, and don't get involved.
Listen, don't even get me started on the British press. I mean, you think the US press is bad? I mean, the British press is ruthless.
But
And
when
just as much as they'll put you up, they'll pull you down. I mean, there are the pits. I'm just gonna say it. They are really awful. And I mean, I said it even from the beginning, like when people were speculating, oh, she's disappeared, there's marital issues, blah, blah, blah. I mean, first and foremost, I understand that they're public figures, but they're also human beings. And, as far as I understand from, William and Kate's agreements with the media is that, they allow so many pictures a year and, so many public appearances and blah, blah, blah. So I think it's been very strategically set. But in saying that, I said it right, when there was all, like you say, all the speculation and fake images, which they were, because I mean, that definitely wasn't her. Well, in my opinion, I mean, how do you just have a bunch of people who don't recognize them and everyone's walking around as if it's normal? I mean,
you're referring to the trip to the market, not the
yeah,
newspaper.
exactly.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I just said it. I said, leave the girl alone.
Yeah.
Leave her alone. Whatever's going on, they need their privacy. She has to protect her children to a degree, and I understand that. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're a public figure or whether you're not. Like, if you have young children, how do you protect those children?
Well, that's why I asked. That's kind of why I asked the question, because you mentioned when you said when your mother was ill, she didn't mention it. She didn't tell. It's the whole stigma part of it. Again,
Yeah. And I think at that time it was worse, actually,
Yeah.
because, the big C, but if you think
Yeah.
about technology now and the improvements and advancements in medications and treatments, it is so much better.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I feel very sad for her that she had to come out and, justify or express or explain what was going on. But again, I guess it was getting out of control, because also their kids go to school. So it's like, well, what are you going to homeschool your kids now? Because there's all these rumors flying around about your mother. I mean, it's a very dangerous position to be in. So, I feel for her, and I hope that she gets the treatment and they give her the privacy that she deserves. But the British tabloids have been like this for centuries. So what difference is it going to make? We can all stand against them at the end of the day, or say leave them alone. But they're like vultures, and it's unfortunate. It's
And
very,
Kerrin,
very
and so
unfortunate.
then with the British tabloids aside,
Yes.
my last question that Kevin and I ask every
because
week:
because
why
of
do
your
you?
good because of your good work and the good
Because of
people
your
that you
good
work
work.
with.
Yes, thank you. Why do you believe in people?
I believe in people because I believe that everybody has a story, and I believe that everybody has something to offer in this world. And I think that part of the reason I I'm such a believer in even people that are not necessarily seen in the public, but are doing fantastic things in their communities or in their work or in their industry. And those stories need to be told. And I think we pay far too much attention to celebrities and nonsense, and not enough attention to people who are doing incredible work in this world to make a difference. So for me, the catalyst in terms of the PR is really getting the people and the individual stories out, and really showcasing the individuals in the most authentic way, and using the media and not allowing the media to use the individuals. So I've always kind of based my principle on that. And just the power of storytelling. I think there's some phenomenal people, and that's why I believe in the people in all aspects of what I'm doing.
Kerrin Black,
So I hope
thank
that
you.
answers your question.
Kerrin
Yes.
Black, thank you for being on Believe in People. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Kerrin.
much.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Well, the organization is called Faces of Hope, and we just spent a half an hour with a face who's filled with hope, one that is going to be unforgettable.
She sure is. And I think that we have to remember those who are trying to fight the good fight, so to speak. And as she said, as she journeys on, or I think you said that, Kevin, but either way, it is a struggle and she needs support. And we certainly believe in her. So if you believe in her and you believe in us, we encourage you to subscribe to our podcast, Believe in People. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.